Hi, my name is Gerhard Schwadner, and welcome to a LinkedIn Live podcast with Harry Kendlbacher, who is joining us from Salzburg, Austria. He's the CEO of the Global Performance Group. Thank you, Harry, for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be with you, Gerhard. We were just chatting a little bit in German. Your German has gotten a little bit rusty, so let's stick with it in English. Thank you for having me.
So you work with a lot of international companies, and I'd like to get your take on where you see the challenges of sales organizations across the globe, and what can we do about it? Because I see a need for acceleration because the economy is slowing down. What do you see?
That's absolutely right. The economy is slowing down, and generally decisions have stalled. And there's a number of research pieces out there. Anything between 70 and 85% of decisions last year have stalled in the B2B selling world. So that's pretty alarming. So the question is, why though, right? And you got to think about and look on why and how people make decisions. And in my opinion, people make decisions one out of two reasons, right? Either to avoid a risk or to gain an outcome. And in an uncertain economy, decision makers are focused more on the first, to avoid a risk. So if you don't have a solution that helps me to avoid a certain risk, and if you can't quantify it to me, I will remain still, or in other words, I won't take a decision or I won't do anything. Pretty much every conversation that we have with our clients is all about we have to increase win rates and we have to increase deal velocity. In other words, we have to win more and we have to win it faster. But, that's a challenge in this environment. And I think the other issue is that although AI is the future and is very, very important to integrate in the different levels within the sales organizations, but it just doesn't fix everything in the sales process, right? And I think that people are finding out that the human element, the human interaction is still very important in this process. So in times like this, an organization really needs to have client-facing people, to have resilience, to have grit, to have a drive with outstanding, not average, outstanding engagement skills. And coming back to the research I've mentioned, there's a ton out there. Obviously, 70% of the buying decision has been made before a salesperson even is engaged in the buyer conversation. So if people are average, when you look at that research, that just doesn't cut it anymore. So it's really interesting. Yes, it's a challenging environment, but I also really believe that when there is a challenging environment, we got to look for the opportunity in this. And I think there's a tremendous opportunity out there for salespeople these days to differentiate themselves with top quality engagement and client partnership. And so, to put it bluntly, I think there's a lot of rubbish salespeople out there, and excuse the honesty here, but it's time to step up, and I think that's the opportunity out there, and focus on what you can influence. Not the environment is the environment; you can't change that. But what is it that you can change? What is it that you can improve? What is it that you can bring to the table? That's what's going to make the difference, and that's what we should focus on, really.
Harry, are there any particular patterns that you can identify that we need to look at, and then how do we improve our response to those patterns in the market?
Sure, and I'm going to refer to something we do at Global Performance Group is really the idea of what does it take to increase these win rates, and again, focus on what we can influence, right? And the process, in my view, has basically 5 steps, and the problem is that sometimes people or organizations do 1 step and then 2 step maybe, but not step 3 and not step 4 and then step 5 again. So there is a real nice flow to these 5 steps, and we're going to run through them quickly for our audience here to take away. So we believe that what it takes to increase win rates really has 5 elements to it. Number 1 is deal qualification, right? Is this winnable business for us? Is this our ideal customer profile? Have we evaluated prospects based on the fit, on the need, on the budget, on the timeline? Have we really qualified these leads out to prioritize these high potential opportunities? So that's step 1, deal qualification. Step 2 is strategic opportunity planning. Plan for the territory, plan for the account, plan for each opportunity in the foundation for filling up the funnel. Who are the stakeholders? What's the opportunity with each one of them? So really strategically plan for each one of those. Step 3 is the idea of what we call key agreements, and I believe it revolutionized win rates, is the idea of identifying and securing key agreements at crucial stages of the sales process. Now, the terminology says agreements, and typically in salespeople's and sales managers and sales leaders' heads is, oh, that's something that happens at the end of the sales process. No, that needs to be happening early in the sales process. So how do we build consensus? How do we build commitment with the different stakeholders? And really, what are those pivotal moments in advancing those deals and overcoming these common obstacles in the sales journey? And so the sales process is not a ticking the box exercise. It's really a series of agreements that builds on, and that makes sure that in hand with step 1 and step 2, we are progressing the opportunities. Step 4, in my opinion, is something that salespeople really are bad at, is this idea of creating urgency. How do we communicate that value and the outcomes of your solutions? You know, how do we uniquely showcase what the cost of inaction is? And that typically drives urgency by emphasizing these pieces. And step 5, in my opinion, is the idea of closing effectively and protecting margins throughout the process. So really, deal qualification, strategic planning, key agreements throughout the sales process, creating urgency in the cost of inaction conversation, and closing and protecting margins throughout it. It's really those 5 steps that have your win rates increase, reduce your sales cycles, and we've seen a tremendous shift in people's increases of win rates when they follow these 5 steps.
Let's zero in for a second on those key agreements. And I totally agree with you that somebody once said that selling is walking the road of agreement together. And we cannot walk too fast, because if we do it, we lose the buyer. And if we're not fast enough responding to the buyer, then the buyer is losing us. Right. So give me a typical example where salespeople that you train, they get those little agreements secured in the selling process.
Sure. And, you know, we have to understand by the nature of the term agreement is a negotiation, right? And a common misconception is that it happens at the end when you have already agreed that you're going to buy my solution, great, and now we're negotiating on terms and conditions. No, it's really that the beginning is whether we're going to do business. Towards the end is how we're going to do business. Right. And you know, I've been at this now for 25 years, and I've seen so many different sales processes, Gerhard, unbelievable. Some of them are 3 steps, some of them are 10 steps, and anything in between. But they all have one thing in common. Salespeople don't use them. They don't comply to them. They're using it as a ticking the box exercise. And that's what's going wrong with this. They're looking at, let's say, step 2 typically is a discovery phase or needs identification phase or something like that. And they're saying, yes, I've asked those questions. Yes, I've identified these needs. And they're moving on to the next step, to proposal or to presentation stage or so forth. And this is where win rates are down because you're progressing prematurely. Second, it drags out the sales process because they won't make a decision. With key agreements, instead of the discovery stage saying, oh, yes, I've done this, we can move on, is a question of, have you agreed on the necessity to change, for example? Have you agreed with the prospect on budget, timeframes, outcomes, decision-making process? Have you agreed that you have access to all the key stakeholders and the decision-making process? So that's really a different sort of shift. Instead of looking at it, have I done this, to build an agreement with the prospect. But salespeople really hate that because it means they have to ask for something early in the process. But salespeople are like, I can't ask for something early. That I need to build relationship and I need to give to progress. Yeah, key agreements throughout the sales process are really important to increase that win rate. And each agreement throughout it builds that probability to win. It's key to do.
Absolutely. And I have to agree with you that those small agreements then make it easier to close the sale. I want to talk about point number 5 for a second.
Sure.
Because in a slowing economy, margin goes down. And you said protect your margins. And a lot of salespeople out there, they are taught how to create value for the customer. But a lot of companies forget the opportunity of creating value for the company.
Right.
So what is the best practice here?
So when we say protect margins, it comes back to what I shared earlier. It's a very common problem that people think, oh, now I'm negotiating when it comes to price and terms and conditions. The biggest challenge that we see in this arena is all the stuff that happens beforehand. And what do I mean by that? I mean by that, by salespeople keep giving little things away throughout the process just to keep the process alive, only to see then that the pricing, and they've eroded all that value, given all that value away, that pricing is not good enough. So shifting their mindset, and this is for people in negotiations, that's a key trait to have and execute, is shifting from what can I concede, when do I concede it, how do I concede it, what signal do I send by conceding it. Let's eliminate that thinking of concessions and think about this as value-based exchanges and trades throughout the negotiation. And that typically ensures that you're not giving things away and leaking margins in the process. I was just interviewing a chief procurement officer, and he said, if we can eliminate that piece of our salespeople giving things away early in the sales process, we don't have to worry about pricing anymore because our pricing is pretty good. And the other thing is, he said, is we as procurement people, we are trained to ask for everything early in the process,
right,
just to get the salespeople into concession mode, right? And then they have nothing left. So it's a real interesting dynamic to put a stance in the ground to say, this is not about what I give up. This is really about what we can exchange value. And of course, then the next level is for salespeople to think, what does high value have to the other party? What is low cost to me? And how do I form these value-based negotiables? And throughout the process is going to be really key.
And I want to let the audience know that Harry Kendlbacher is going to deliver some phenomenal value at our Sales Acceleration Summit on June 25th and 26th. And I like to get your take on what is the mindset shift that salespeople need to go through in this economy where deals are slowing down, where there are more decision makers involved in making the decision, and there's higher pressure on margins.
I really believe that salespeople really need to have courage. To have courage to engage in a way that they haven't done so before. And we define courage as the competence of the skill and the confidence to execute the skill well. That will give you courage to do that. And I'm going to pick out one of the pieces in the 5 steps win rates for this, to say that cost of inaction conversation is essential to have in this tough economy, and to have it on a senior executive level with our senior executive stakeholders. You know, when you look at the definition of things, the cost of inaction conversation really refers to a sales framework used in to highlight, really, shall I say, very hidden consequences of not making a decision or really delaying some action. It helps potential customers to understand the tangible and intangible costs they incur by maintaining, doing nothing, the status quo, instead of taking proactive steps in action. But the problem is that's extremely uncomfortable to do, and it creates tension, and salespeople with that mindset of, oh, I've got to protect the relationship. Oh, I've got to service the customer. Oh, my job is to give them what they're asking for. All of that makes sure that they're avoiding that tension and they're not having that cost of inaction conversation. So really having that competence and confidence to courageously engage with that cost of inaction conversation is going to shift people's win rates. And you know, one of the challenges is that cost of inaction conversation is always confused with return on investment, right? It's different. The cost of inaction conversation refers to exactly the cost that is going to hit you if you don't do this. ROI is the potential improvement of what we will get, or what you will get as outcomes as a result of working with us. So there is different elements to that, and it just puts that extra little pressure on people to really face and show, or see the mirror. These are the consequences if I do nothing. If
Harry,
you do that well, it's really cool.
Is it better to ask the customer what they believe the cost of inaction is, or is it better to tell the customer?
Well, I always believe in a conversation, right? Telling, or a conversation needs to go both ways, but you have to be prepared to really quantify this in terms of numbers, in terms of losses, in terms of issues that doing nothing would create to any of their processes. So preparation is key, and of course AI can help with that tremendously. But there needs to be a level of preparation, and it has to be a dialogue. But a certain way of telling is not bad in this instance.
We have 1 minute left, and I'd like for you to share a quick success story.
Sure. By a quick success story, by a Fortune 200 company, roughly, had a win rate of 31% by implementing that 5-step win rate approach that I've shared. Their win rates increased within 6 months to 51%. Super success story. Very cool. It's driven by their leadership. It's driven by their management. Salespeople are accountable for it. Great success story. If anybody wants to know more, you know where to find.
How do people get in touch with you?
globalperformancegroup.com. Reach out. My team will get in touch ASAP with you.
And we will publish a link for the Sales 3.0 conference where Harry is going to deliver a keynote. Thank you for joining us. And now maybe you end with a rendition of From the Sound of Music.
The hills are alive, my lovely people. The weather is beautiful, and they are truly alive.
Awesome. Dankeschön, Harry.